Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, you can submit it anonymously at www.asksean.org. So I'm thinking today about just the benefit in practicing doing things wrong, which I'm kind of putting it a little provocatively. But this is coming from an experience I had today in my riding lesson, my horseback riding lesson, where I had gotten a bit jostled at one point and my foot had kind of gone through the stirrup into a position that wasn't ideal. This is why when you horseback ride, you're supposed to always wear boots or some kind of shoe that has a really substantial heel that the stirrup can hit, because it's really bad if your foot goes all the way through. That can be very dangerous and painful and whatnot. So, at any rate, my foot had come through a bit further forward than was ideal, and so I was talking with my instructor about that. And so we started just doing some drills where I'm trotting and cantering and starting out with my foot in the correct position and then moving it into, on purpose, like moving it into the incorrect position and then moving it back to the correct position, all during movement. And it was a great, really useful exercise. Yeah, and it's interesting how it very quickly, and kind of at least at this point in my, kind of my experience level and whatnot. So maybe it could take longer if we tried this a year or two ago, certainly. But I was just struck by how quickly it did shift this experience from something of like, I've gotten stuck, to feeling more agency in regards to it. Because here I'm intentionally doing the bad thing, intentionally doing the wrong thing, and then I'm practicing fixing it. Granted, took me some repetition to get it, and honestly, I need to do it some more. But yeah, it's just such an interesting thing, because we can think that we'll just practice the good thing, just practice the right thing. We don't want to do the bad habits in our life, right? We want to get rid of those. But sometimes there's a place for intentionally doing the wrong thing so that you can then intentionally practice doing the right thing. Now, I'm sure there's 1,000 caveats and exceptions to this. Like, I'm not suggesting, like, if you have a problem with robbing banks, that you should, intentionally, go start robbing a bank so that you can then practice, correcting that. Like, so there's obviously a lot of limits, to this principle, right? Like, but I do think it's a useful idea. And I think a variation on this, this is something I use all the time in my work with clients, is that when there's a pattern that they're trying to change and they can't yet change it, but we've worked together to help them get to the point where they can be conscious of it. They're at least observing as they sort of psychologically drive themselves over the cliff. Like it, where was I going with this? Like, the value there is that even though you can't yet change it, what you can do is you can practice being really awake to it. And in that being awake to it, you then practice after the fact, like revisiting of, like, where do I wish I would have chosen differently? Like, if I had the ability, where do I wish I would have turned, instead of just keep going. And so that's a way that you can still kind of do this. Like, in this case, you don't yet have the sort of the emotional ability or, agency to choose to not do the whatever the unhealthy thing is. But you can keep staying with the experience and keep revisiting it and sort of rehearsing, like, how do I wish I would have done it differently? Not with shame, that's the caveat I'm always giving, right? Like, if you're just beating yourself up, that's not going to be useful. Shame's not helpful here. I don't think shame is ever helpful, at least in terms of how I think about shame. But yeah, so this is a variation, right? Like, it's like where, okay, well, I'm still doing the bad thing. I'm not yet able to change that. But I can be practicing at least after the fact of like, how do I wish I would have done it differently? How do I wish I would have done the good thing? Because if you do that enough, if you practice that enough, you are building mental, emotional muscles, and you're training your psyche, training your brain that like, I want to notice this earlier so that I turn the car, metaphorically speaking, before I drive into the wall or drive off the cliff, kind of thing. Um, but again, I think there can be other places, and I honestly can't think of like a psychological example at the moment. Um, but certainly there are other kinds of places, at least, and I think potentially psychological places where you can, actually practice doing, the wrong thing. Well, actually, no, I think about this like, this is a small example, but like, say, you have a lot of internal resistance to being mean. Um, so now we don't go out and just be mean to other people, but in a safe context like the therapy room, you could practice saying something mean as a way of like grappling with what does that bring up for you. The goal here isn't to be mean. The goal is to grapple with what's all my resistance about asserting myself. Any kind of assertion of myself feels like being mean, um, and so therefore like I'm not able to have boundaries in places in ways that I need to. Um, and so in this case, I mean, this is maybe I don't know if this is the greatest example. The idea here is still sound, but I may be illustrating something different. But at any rate, um, yeah, maybe I'll just hold off on that. This is I'm starting to get longer and more rabbit traily, but yeah. So this is just something I was pondering, kind of some in process thoughts. So I'll let y'all play with those fragments of ideas and see how they might apply to your life. Where is there something, yeah, you can appropriately practice doing wrong so that you can then practice doing it right, so you can get better at correcting it. Um, so, well, until next time, peace be with you.